In a way, it seems like forever ago that Oklahoma and Iowa State were battling for the Big 12 championship in 2020. It's been just less than 2 years ago. Much has changed for both programs, especially at OU. Of course, the two get together this coming Saturday for positioning at the lower portion of the Big 12. And of course, bowl eligibility in the next few weeks, hopefully, if the Sooners can notch some wins. Talking Sooners, of course, for the next 60 here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all being here. Please leave your comments and questions there in the live chat. We will get to them. The super chat's available as well. Please show your consideration of that. And please hit the like button as we get started with Jason Ray, who makes it all work, makes it all happen here at the Voice of College Football OU, and is your post-game host as well. Jason, appreciate you being here as always. What's going on today?
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a little bit of a different situation here in the back half of the season for Oklahoma, where they're fighting for bowl eligibility versus fighting for positioning in the top part of the Big 12. But it's a good opportunity to see what this team is made of here in the last half. They got the win against Kansas going into the bye week. Hopefully they are able to get a little bit healthy and see what they can do in the stretch run as the season hits the closing part of the second half of the season.
Want to remind everyone that Oklahoma Sooners Live is brought to you by Modern Day ABA on YouTube. We will tell you more about the services there, and we appreciate their sponsorship. All right, folks, leave those comments and questions in the live chat. We will get to them. And the Sooners coming off a bye week, Jason. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is get healthy, get anybody who's nicked up ready to go, time to reset, time to refocus. And from a health standpoint, again, get ready for the stretch drive. On the other hand, based on what players and coaches said, based on just your own observation, do you think there was anything in particular that seemed to be the focus of the off week?
I think, there was a couple of guys, Mark, that you'd mentioned just from just trying to get some of those kids back healthy. Our Mason Thomas is one that is a freshman this year, but has showed some promise. I think he's been a little bit banged up. I think he's in a position where he's probably a little bit much more ready to go than he has been over the last couple of weeks. So I think that's big for a defensive line that has really struggled getting pressure on the quarterback over the last really kind of outside of the non-conference games. So I think that'll be good for that defensive line. Billy Bowman's a guy that we think may potentially be back. I'm hearing that that's probably not the case. He's probably closer to a Baylor or maybe even a Texas Tech return. So that's again something that's difficult in the back half of the secondary for Oklahoma to be able to be successful, obviously. And if you're not able to rush the passer at a high level, your secondary has got to get into a position where they can hold up really well, but which they haven't done. But I think one of the things we saw a couple of weeks ago was Key Lawrence played probably his best game of the year in that safety spot. So if you can get some continued good play out of that secondary, it gives you an opportunity to be successful. And as we mentioned last week, Mark, against the team Iowa State that has, they've had a lot of close games, but they're not, they're certainly not one of the top offensive teams in the league. At this point through 4 conference games, only scoring 65 points. So I think you're optimistic if you're Oklahoma being able to play a little bit better defense this week against maybe a team that's not quite as explosive as a couple of the teams that you've played.
Yeah, Iowa State has struggled on that side of the ball. We know what they had last year and in really the previous 3 to 4 years with Xavier Hutchinson on the outside, Charlie Kohler, one of the best tight ends in college football, Brock Purdy, a veteran quarterback and offensive lineman that littered the Big 12 and the national lists of top offensive lines and offensive linemen. And really, Hutchinson was the guy that came back after they lost all that, plus Brees Hall. And, you never know how a program and how a team is prepared to respond. And you would think that this would be a possible outcome at a school like Iowa State that just doesn't cycle in 4 and 5 stars like it's nothing, like we see with the Georgia defense picking up its top 2 to 3 status in the country, even though they lost a ridiculous amount of NFL talent, a record there that Iowa State kind of ebbs and flows. And of course, Matt Campbell's really good at what he does, and he's built that program to a certain level to where they're not going to drown out in terms of what we've seen in past decades out of Iowa State, but still they have definitely hurt from suffering those offensive losses in what was probably the best offensive set of skill players and offensive line and complete unit that they've ever seen in the history of the program.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Mark. I think, but the one thing that you can say is conversely, yes, they've struggled on the offensive side of the ball, but they've been statistically speaking the best defense in the Big 12 through 4 games. They've only allowed 79 points, so less than 20 points per game on the defensive side of the ball. So, obviously Iowa State wants to grind this out and make this a very much a sloppy fourth quarter defensive game because if it's a defensive game, obviously, if you're Iowa State, you like your you like your chances there. But they've been able to play really, really sound defensively. I think it's anchored by Will McDonald on the defensive line for them. But yeah, to only give up 79 points through the 4 games is, like I mentioned, the best in the Big 12. And then they held Kansas to 14 points. They held Kansas State to 10, Texas to 24. Yeah, a lot of good defensive and close games, unlike a couple of the Oklahoma games that certainly weren't close. So they're a little bit maybe even more battle tested than Oklahoma from a defensive perspective, knowing some of the same teams, but they certainly played better on the defensive side, much better than Oklahoma has with those common opponents, Kansas State, and Texas on the schedule at this point.
Yeah, I got to think that while we should credit Iowa State's defense for playing that well, that it's also a byproduct of the style of games that they're playing, that they kind of try to limit the number of possessions and play those kind of games. You just see that with the lack of scoring, they've played a 14-11 game that comes to mind against Kansas. They've played a 10-9 game against Kansas State that comes to mind. And those teams aren't playing those types of games outside of playing Iowa State. That, again, credit the defense, but also I'm sure it's been a approach that Matt Campbell and his staff have taken to say, this is the way that we can stay competitive in games, and this gives us our best shot of winning. It hasn't worked out that way, but at least they've stayed in all these one-score games to the very end. And that's the kind of football that they're playing right now. Jimmy Satterfield's asking, can we hold them to 30? So the way Iowa State's playing on offense in terms of their ineptitude, I don't want to drag it down to those levels, but they're struggling on offense and they're playing this type of football. So you would think this is a great opportunity for the OU defense to get healthy.
Yeah, you would think. Certainly, and I mentioned kind of in last week that we talked about where Oklahoma's average, giving up an astonishing, I think it's in the neighborhood of 47, 48 points a game, through the Big 12 season thus far, 187 points in 4 games, which is obviously very clearly the worst in the Big 12. Maybe not. I mean, not significantly worse. I mean, they're right behind West Virginia. West Virginia's given up 181 points in 4 games. So, but still, it's not at all what you would anticipate coming in. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think if you're um, you've got to hope that you can hold Iowa State to 24 to 27 points in that neighborhood to be able to win this game, because this isn't Kansas defense. Obviously, no disrespect to Kansas this year, they're much better, but they've given up a decent amount of points over the last few weeks. TCU, Oklahoma, and then last week Baylor as well. Although they did make that game lot more competitive late, but still, I think you go in there hoping that you can hold them and kind of win a 31-27 game, 27-24 type of game, and you can score enough with being as healthy as this offense has been. I think probably all year. You feel like that you have that opportunity, but Oklahoma has a glaring mismatch on the defensive side of the ball with, which most teams do. One of the best wide receivers in the Big 12, if not the country, but Xavier Hutchinson's over 700 yards receiving, clearly the best receiver on the team, but have that opportunity to make this a more low-scoring game, which is probably what both teams want to a certain degree, knowing that Oklahoma probably won't be able to, score in the 40s or 50s against this Iowa State team. To your point, that's going to kind of shorten the game. And, you go to Ames, Iowa at 11 a.m. It's not, the probably the most exciting environment for these kids to play in on the road, specifically coming off of a bye week. So, how they start is big, in these types of games. Is if you can get some success and have some success, I should say, particularly on the defensive side. Mark, they've not had a lot of sustained success early on in games, as of late. A little bit against Kansas, but still, Oklahoma scored first, and then Kansas, they matched that and scored immediately. So, if you can get a couple possession lead early on, I think that helps that confidence of the defense that really just hasn't had any good things that has happened over the last 3 or 4 games.
I'm no handicapper, I'm no odds maker. At the same time, when people throw games at me without me seeing the line, I'm usually really good about pinpointing what the Vegas spread's going to be. Oklahoma has thrown me for a curve this year just because we know what they were supposed to be. And then they go through that horrendous 3 game stretch. Then they come out of it in decent shape, but still giving up 42 points. So I didn't test myself on this one. I just looked it up. But yeah, I don't know where I would have gone with this, except I'm pretty sure I would have thought Oklahoma would have been the favorite. So they go to Iowa State. Iowa State's 0-4 in the conference. And Oklahoma is coming off a game in which they were a 9-point favorite and they covered. And now they're going to Iowa State. And of course, there's a lot there having to do with home versus road. That's typically a 3-point swing, but still 1.5. And then I got to think that Vegas has a whole lot of issues in trying to figure out what to do with these two teams when you throw them together, when you throw the Oklahoma offense and also the defensive issues at an Iowa State team that's going to take the air out of the ball and isn't scoring and isn't playing, giving up points on defense. You get two completely contrasting points models there, and they pretty much cut it even there at, you're looking at a 28-27 game, according to Vegas.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. As you would look on the outside looking in, Mark, with kind of bated interest in this 55, it almost seems low based on Oklahoma's propensity to get into high scoring games. But to your point, they will. I mean, Iowa State. This is how Matt Campbell plays, generally speaking. Just not necessarily taking into account this particular year and this particular team, but he always plays that way to a certain degree. And Oklahoma has historically, over the years, even when they've had a much better, even offensive team than they do, even when they do this year, They have historically struggled to get into the 30s consistently. Against this team. I think it all started when they didn't necessarily have a great team and came up to Norman and beat Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield's last year. At Oklahoma. Then they've consistently, it's been each and every year it's been a struggle offensively. So yeah, I mean that's probably I would maybe lean towards the over in that, slightly, but yeah, it's probably right on the money.
Jason's take brought to you, in a sense, for entertainment purposes only. So nobody go out there and blame Jason next week, as I'm often saying with my predictions. Don't blame me the next week. They're just what they are. You can trust the record to a certain extent, but that's what it is. Which is a good little segue into our Patreon offering, where you can talk Oklahoma football and college football 24/7, 365. And you go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV, and you sign up there. And if I can find the appropriate banner, there it is. Talk Sooners all the time, talk college football all the time on the Discord. And also, you get my predictions on all the top 25 and other games. And we've got a media panel of 19, including Jason, that pick the games, and they are subjected to the games I give them. So I give them the 12 toughest games to select each week, and they go at those straight up and against the spread. All right, everyone. 1 in 44 children, so let that sink in, now estimated to be on the autism spectrum. And with the prevalence of this disorder increasing, it is important for parents and caregivers to know the signs of autism and the steps that you can take to make sure that your children have the support they need. Sarah Morris is a board-certified behavior analyst in Oklahoma. She specializes in early intervention autism treatment. She's got a YouTube channel called Modern Day ABA, and she uses that platform to educate the world about autism and to share strategies and resources for caregivers and families. Again, her name's Sarah. She's doing outstanding work. Check out her YouTube channel, Modern Day ABA. Her contact information and social media links are in the description of every video here at the Voice of College Football. They're right at the top of every video description right here at the Voice of College Football OU. So if you or someone you know might benefit from this information, these resources, be sure to check it out. On the recruiting front, I know that there's no real concrete news, but there's a few things out there of note that are being talked about in the chat, and a few things, Jason, that you mentioned to me before we jumped on in regards to just some recruiting notes.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think the good thing to report at this point, there's been no decommitments right now. Jackson Arnold really kind of reaffirmed his commitment to Oklahoma. Last week, he was actually even a guest on Gabe Eichard and Teddy Lehman's podcast. So I think, given the fact that he's there and he's was on there and he's still actively recruiting some other guys for Oklahoma, I would say that's pretty. There was a lot of concern, I think, just kind of where Oklahoma's been this year and things like that. So I think his commitment's pretty about as solid as you can get at this point. Right. You never know. I'm sure he's got, people banging at his door exactly, with where Oklahoma's been this year and just how good of a year he's had, Mark. So I think that's first and foremost, the positive news, I think, which is, obviously going to be music to Oklahoma fans' ears. Really just kind of talking about, the fact that, how he enjoys his relationship with Venables and things like that. And with the staff. But when Oklahoma has a bad year, there's a lot of negative recruiting that can happen against them. So, I think it's very interesting, Mark, when you when you look at some of the guys that Oklahoma has been going up against and things like that around with Texas A&M, and Texas A&M is arguably having just as bad or disappointing of a year as as Oklahoma is right now. You could make an argument that maybe A&M's a little bit worse based on the talent that they've had. They brought in, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So again, that's one. I think Colton Bostic, I think Thane is a little bit fluid. He still hasn't decommitted or anything, but I think um, I think there's probably some interest with him in Texas and maybe even Oregon, which was part of that list. But he's not. He's still confirmed his commitment. I think the one thing that's really come across here over the last day or so is Anthony Evans is going to be taking a visit to Georgia on November 5th when Georgia hosts Tennessee. Everything that I'm aware of right now, I don't know that I don't believe it's an official visit. I think it's unofficial. So obviously that game, if both Tennessee and Georgia continue to play well, that's going to be just a dynamic atmosphere in Athens. So I think that is, you never know. I don't know if it's cause for concern at this point, Mark. It is, when you have guys that are taking other visits late in the cycle after, I mean, it is kind of concerning to a certain degree, but given the fact of, Oklahoma's underachieved based on where everybody expected them to be at this point this year. You've got to understand that to a certain degree that that's coming, right? So, but there's going to be a lot of ebb and flow here the last, these next month and a half, couple of months until, well, it's really just a little bit over a month, I guess, until National Signing Day, and so you'll have. You may have some A&M guys, and there's a lot of rumors about some of these guys getting kicked off the team or some transfers happening. So, you'll have a lot of that'll happen. If Oklahoma happens to lose a couple of these recruits, I think they'll go hard on the portal. But like I said, good news is no one's decommitted yet, but it'll be interesting to see how some of this stuff goes. And if I'm an Oklahoma fan, I'm not really leading too much into this, but from everything that I've been told, DJ Hicks has not canceled his official visit to Oklahoma. He's still planning on having that visit to Oklahoma. He's been, and it's hard to tell with kids and what they do on social media, but he's again been very pro Oklahoma in some of his likes and mentions and stuff like that. But I still think there's obviously a very, very strong reason to believe that he'll be at A&M, but the fact that he has not, canceled that visit, and I think that the staff is really, still really pushing him, I think is an idea that maybe they feel like that they're still in the game a little bit. So.
Right, folks, talking Sooners here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody being here. Please go out there and grab some other college football fans for the rest of our show today. We've got Levi Stevenson from SB Nation headed our way to talk Iowa State OU and get some folks back in here next Wednesday. We're here every Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 a.m. where it counts. So please join us and bring some friends with you. So we're at 7 games down, 5 to go. And so the equation is go 2-3 and make a bowl game at 6-6, which seems, wow, the bar has dropped considerably, but that's what we're looking at based on the performances here in the last 6 weeks. If we look at the rest of the season, Jason, and you kind of size it up in regards to what you hope to see, and without getting far into, running the table, squeezing into a Big 12 championship, just something. And actually, we can hold that because we got Levi coming on here So we'll just bring Levi in here. Levi Stevenson, SB Nation, wide right, natty light. Levi, how you doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing well, doing well. Appreciate you being here. This is Jason Ray, who hosts our post game here at the Voice of College Football on OU. Everybody, that's Levi Stevenson again, wide right, natty light on SB Nation, joins us on a regular basis to break down the Cyclones. We were kind of talking the Iowa State brand of football, Levi, in terms of what it's become this year with all the lost personnel on offense, grind it out, try to win close games. We've seen 14-11. We've seen 10-9. They haven't gone your way, but did you expect this approach because of all those offensive personnel losses going into this season?
I would say no, only on the basis of we thought that you lose a bunch of personnel, like I say, Brock Purdy, Brees Hall, Charlie Kohler, all these guys. But knowing what we had coming back in Hunter Deckers and Xavier Hutchinson and things like that, a lot of us expected to see a vertical offense. I was really going to try to push the ball down the field, take some chances, knowing that you don't have the personnel that can really sit there and grind out 90-yard drives like you used to be able to with Brees Hall and Charlie Kohler and all that, where you have an automatic first down machine like Charlie Kohler. Xavier Hutchinson is very, very good on third down, but Charlie Kohler was automatic basically. And so not having him and not having Brees Hall where you can just give him the ball and he'll get you 5-6 yards every time. Not having those guys makes those long drives harder. And we expected coming into the season to see them utilize Hunter Decker's big arm and all that to push a more vertical offense down the field. And we saw a little bit of that against Southeast Missouri. But after that, the offense became very, very condensed. And part of it was play calling. Play calling definitely brought the offense much closer to this line of scrimmage. But part of it too was Hunter Deckers getting into his rhythm and getting used to starting. Is that he's taking checkdowns a lot. He's taking a lot of shallow crossing routes and flat routes by the running backs and things like that, where he's defaulting. And sorry if you hear that truck going by, but he's defaulting to these checkdowns a lot more than he probably should be, and some of that has hindered the offense. That's allowed defenses to come in closer to the closer to line of scrimmage, bring in more to the box, and really hamper that run game. That said, we did see a step forward against Texas. We saw them open up the offense a little bit more. We saw them push the ball downfield and try to spread that Texas defense out a little bit more to try to create some more room for other things. Now, the running game still really didn't get going, but we also have that whole room is very injured. Jarrell Brock has been injured off and on most of the season. Cartavius Norton's been injured most of the season. That situation seems to be getting better, but it's still kind of one of those things. The Texas game, though, it was a step in the right direction, but the fairly condensed and conservative offense we've seen up to this point has been more so than maybe we thought it was going to be.
For a program that's now becoming accustomed to challenging in the Big 12, I know that obviously this has taken a downturn this year in terms of wins and losses, but still there's a lot of pride there. And the program, Matt Campbell has established that it's no longer the Iowa State of generations gone by. That I know that the Texas game wasn't a big game in terms of Big 12 implications, but still, I didn't watch the early portions of that game, but I checked in the fourth quarter when I thought, okay, Iowa State's making a run at this. I want to see the fourth quarter. And that final drive had to be excruciating when Xavier Hutchinson doesn't haul in what would have been a probable game-winning touchdown pass. And then the very next play, or maybe two plays later, the knees rolled still in the air when I thought it was on the turf. And the Iowa State's drive should have continued.
Yeah, it was, the Texas game, like it's, I thought coming out of that game, I thought both teams played well for the most part. Like I thought Iowa State's offense did pretty well. They moved the ball. It wasn't perfect by any means. Obviously, like Xavier dropped that long pass, and there was a couple mistakes. But for the most part, the Iowa State offense was much better than it had been in previous weeks. The defense was very, very good. They slowed down what was kind of a high-flying Texas offense up to that point. Bijan and Roshan Johnson made some outstanding individual plays all day that helped them, but they weren't getting easy yards. They weren't getting a free 6 yards and then turning it into 8. They were getting 1 or 2 and turning it into 6 through just pure individual effort. And credit goes to them, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason Bijan Robinson is considered, probably the best back in college football or whatever. There's a reason for it. He's very, very good. I thought it was a well played game between two well matched teams, and it's just kind of one of those things where Xavier Hutchinson brings that in. Iowa State gets that win, and Iowa State's 4-3 instead of 3-4, and maybe we were, I don't know how much differently we feel. You feel good that you get the win, but I don't think even though you lose that game, I don't think you come out of that game discouraged because of the loss or anything like that. So. I think we're starting to see Iowa State getting pointed in the right direction, at least, especially the offense. The defense has been spectacular all season. I mean, they somehow have gotten better, even losing Mike Rose and all those guys somehow have gotten better. And so they've been outstanding all year, and the offense does seem to be starting to round the corner a little bit.
Do you have anything, Jason?
Well, I think it's interesting in this game when you look at it, from the outside looking in here, it looks like you've got strength against strength with Oklahoma's offense going against Iowa State's defense, and then kind of relative weakness versus weakness in terms of, relatively speaking, Iowa State's offense going against Oklahoma's defense that has been much maligned coming into this obviously this week over the last 3 or 4 games, just playing as bad as they've played and really just in quite some time, and it's been even worse before that, obviously, I mean, which has been recounted time and time again, but kind of interestingly that it's gotten worse this year. So I think from your perspective, yes, I agree with you, Levi. The defense has been really, really good, and probably a bit of surprise from the Iowa State side. So what's the feeling from a game plan perspective kind of coming into this game? Is it very similar to what Mark mentioned in the outset on here, and just really in terms of do you think Iowa State continues to try to take the air out of the ball and make this a kind of a low scoring game, or do you think there's more, they've looked at film and look how bad Oklahoma's defense has been, like, we have a lot of opportunities to get some plays down the field, as you mentioned, more kind of a vertical passing game?
Are you speaking from like Iowa State's offense to Oklahoma's defense?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think they're going to look at that and see that Oklahoma has really struggled both to defend the pass and the run. And teams, I was looking at some stats last night, and teams are running more on Oklahoma's defense more than they're running on almost any defense in college football. Unfortunately for Iowa State, the running game has sort of been a weakness up to this point. That said, running backs should be getting healthy, and they can use some of that vertical passing game to help open up the run. Because the passing game is far more developed right now, and they have the playmakers to use the pass to set up the run type of thing. So I think they'll use some of that to their advantage, and they'll know that they'll have some opportunities down the field. And then it comes down to execution there for Iowa State, to be able to hit those deep balls and to force Oklahoma to play back from the line of scrimmage and not commit 7 to the box, or whatever it is, and to be able to basically just take away shallow crossers and runs and be fine with it, like Kansas and Kansas State and all them were able to.
Yeah.
So if they continue what they were doing against Texas and starting to push the ball downfield, and using some of that athleticism they got out wide, I think they'll do that to attempt to try to pull Oklahoma away from the line of scrimmage and then close out the game on the ground.
And you mentioned that Jarrell Brock has been injured. What's his health look like coming into this game? Because I know he was very limited.
He sprained an ankle a couple weeks ago, and sprained ankles just take forever to heal.
Yeah.
So it's going to be one of those things where he's going to get probably fairly limited snaps. He's going to be running at 60% or whatever he's at, type of thing. So like he'll play. I don't know how much. I don't know how effective he'll be. But he'll play. He's too good of a pass blocker to not have him available. Fortunately, Cartavius Norton, he's a true freshman. He's really, really gifted back. He just has been hurt a lot of this season so far. Sounds like he's healthy and ready to go. So I would guess he'll probably get the lion's share of the rushing carries. Him and Deion Silas, I would assume, we'll split those with Jarrell Brock getting a couple here and there.
Okay.
Levi, if Vegas hits its numbers here, I don't know if you can see them 1.5, and you've probably looked at them anyway. I don't know if you're a big betting, wagering guy, odds making guy, but over under at 55. And again, Iowa State at home is a 1.5 point favorite. So if Vegas hits the mark on this, it's a 28-27 Iowa State win.
Honestly, this is one of those games I do feel pretty decent about it, honestly. Oklahoma's got a great offense and a not great defense. But I think Iowa State's defense is one of the probably 5 best in college football right now. If you look at like opponent adjusted yards per play and stuff like that, I mean, they're an outstanding defense. By design, Iowa State's defense is basically built to stop Oklahoma's offense, where you get some of these zone run types concepts, and you've got lots of old air raid passing designs. I mean, the defense was built around stopping Oklahoma, and the Oklahoma offense isn't like structurally super different from what it was under Lincoln Riley. They're running the ball more, but schematically, it's not a lot different. So Iowa State's defensive scheme fits. Trying to stop Oklahoma really well. The personnel's there. If barring some sort of catastrophic special teams play, which isn't out of the realm of possibility because special teams has been bad, but if Oklahoma is forced to drive 75, 80 yards on almost all of their drives, I think they're going to struggle to put up a big point total. So then it comes back to Iowa State's offense. Is it going to be the offense we saw against Kansas State and Kansas, and where they're going to struggle to move the ball because they can't get out of their own way, or is it going to be what we saw against Texas, where they're pushing it down the field and they're really trying to take advantage of all that athleticism they have at the wide receiver position? If that shows up and we see a progression of what we saw against Texas, I like Iowa State's chances. And if you're ever going to try to pick off Oklahoma for the 3rd time in 6 years, this is probably about as good a time to do it because they're definitely down. And Iowa State's defense is going to keep them in every single game they play. I talked about it last night on my own podcast, is that we're, just because of how good this defense is and how inconsistent this offense is, we're probably doomed to play 1-score games for the rest of the season. But I do like our chances.
This is how different these two teams are playing. Okay, we're going to throw out the Texas game. Okay, that was a 24-21 or 45-point total for the Iowa State side, and 49-0, of course. If I do the math right, I think that was a 49 total for the Oklahoma Texas side. But if we look at Kansas and Kansas State, look at those two matchups. When Oklahoma played Kansas, they put up 94 points total. When Iowa State played Kansas, they put up 25. And when Oklahoma played Kansas State, they put up 75. And when Iowa State played Kansas State, they put up 19. These are two, when I look at that point total that Vegas throws up at 55, I figure, yeah, they're just splitting the difference between Oklahoma's insane offense / inept defense versus the type of games that Iowa State's posting, where they're just taking the air out of the ball, playing great defense, trying to limit it to one possession, and let's see if we can win in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, in that I don't really see this game ending up in the middle. I think it's one way or the other, actually. If Oklahoma figures something out, finds some spots on the defense, then maybe and there's enough possessions. Like if Iowa State's pushing the ball downfield and getting short offensive possessions, and Oklahoma finds something here or there, then you could get a higher scoring game. I would wager it's going to go the other way, probably. I think this is probably going to be a lower scoring game where both teams are in the 20s or lower. But we'll see. Like I said, it just depends on turnovers and field position almost entirely in this one, just because with the strength on strength, Iowa State's defense is super salty. And, I was kind of going through this in my mind last night a little bit, just thinking about this is probably going to be, I don't remember every team he played at UCF and Florida State. I would wager, though, that this is probably the best defense that Dylan Gabriel will have played and may ever play in college football. And it's probably the best pass rusher he's gone up against too in Will McDonald. So this is going to be a big challenge for him. And Iowa State has done a really good job of taking away the opposing quarterback. Quinn Ewers was not really a factor against Texas. Jalen Daniels didn't do much of anything against Kansas. Adrian Martinez had some design run plays that worked, but for the most part, wasn't really what beat Iowa State in that game. You know, they've taken away the quarterback for the most part in these games, and basically forced the other team to beat them with something that wasn't their primary option. So that'll be the challenge on Oklahoma is can Eric Gray take over and have a really good game or something like that, because I think Iowa State's going to limit Oklahoma's explosive potential quite a bit.
Well, Levi, I would like to be the guy and sometimes pride myself in being the guy that would do the Rolodex in my head on Dylan Gabriel's career to find that team, but I can't. So
yeah, I don't know. If it's not the best defense he's played, it's probably up there.
Yeah.
So
maybe
this will be a big
defense
challenge.
might have been from a talent perspective right there, but that's about it. Exactly.
Right, exactly. Like it's way up there, and it'll be a big challenge for Dylan Gabriel, even in an offense that's very friendly to his skill set, which is exactly what an offense is supposed to be.
Right.
So that's it'll be a really fun, because it's a big strength against a big strength, and a big weakness against a big weakness. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to watch for sure. It'll be the whole unstoppable force and movable object thing.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to your point, I think whichever team can really make the other team play their game is going to win. Like, for instance, just looking at some of the previous scores, I think Oklahoma would love a 2019 game where it was a 42-41 game.
Yep.
Yeah, but the last couple of games have been 27-21, 28-21. So
if it's a high-scoring game, I would say it's probably not hanging with Oklahoma on offense. But if it's a low-down rock fight, I like Iowa State's chances.
Hey, Levi, if you've got one more minute, I only have one other thing. I would like to get the trajectory on this program. So even though this is a down season, do you still feel good about what Matt Campbell's doing and the trajectory up and what we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years?
For sure. The depth on the roster is far above anything we've seen from a recruiting standpoint. The defense still continues to be very, very good. One of the best in college football. On a year in, year out basis. And the offense is really the biggest thing that the offense has going against it is it's really young. And that's just what it is. Lots of turnover. It's really young. You know, after this season, Hunter Deckers will still be back. All the running backs will still be back. The only receiver you're going to lose is Xavier Hutchinson. He could technically come back, but I would be kind of surprised if he did. You know, you're going to have most of your playmakers back. You're going to have most of that offensive line back. So you're going to get a lot of it back. It's just one of those things where it's a big turnover year. Lots of young players, and that's just kind of, going through some of those growing pains. But overall, though, the program is still absolutely on a great trajectory to continue to be a contender at the top of this Big 12 and the new Big 12.
Anything else, Jason?
No, I don't think so. I think it's. I mean, you mentioned it, Mark, before Levi came on, but it was interesting. These two teams played for a Big 12 championship a few years ago, and now. A little bit different circumstances, but I think it's always between these two teams. It's always a very close game. I'm looking here. It's been
every single game in the Matt Campbell era has been 10 points or less.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's been a 10-point game or less since.
And even that 10-point game when Kyler Murray was here, when Kyler Murray was at Oklahoma State, when I was at Oklahoma. It was a 10-point game, and that it didn't play like a 10-point game. There was kind of a garbage score at the end to extend the lead, but. Yeah. That was a close game even, so.
Yep.
All right, folks, Levi Stevenson, whyrightnattylight.com, SB Nation. Get on over there, check out Levi's work, and you can catch his Twitter handle. You see it right down there on the banner. Levi, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to break down the Cyclones for us.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, good stuff. All right, folks, OU Sooners live right here at the Voice of College Football. And again, we are brought to you by Modern Day ABA with all the outbreak out there, considering that about 2% of children are estimated to be on the autism spectrum. The disorder is unfortunately increasing. And so it's important for parents and caretakers to take the appropriate steps that they need to take to make sure that their children have the support that they need. Sarah Morris is a board certified behavior analyst in Oklahoma. She specializes in early intervention autism treatment. She's got a YouTube channel, and that YouTube channel is featured right on our description section of all the videos right here at the Voice of College Football. You can go there and find it there. It's called Modern Day ABA. And Sarah uses her platform to educate the world about autism and to share the strategies and resources that caregivers and families need. Again, her name's Sarah. Her YouTube channel, check it out, Modern Day ABA. Even if this doesn't impact you right now, again, this is something that is an issue in our country, of course. You can get all her contact information and social media links in the description section of all the videos here at Oklahoma, the Voice of College Football. And if you or somebody you know may benefit from the resources there, please be sure to check it out. All right, Jason. If there's not anything on the OU front, is there anything on the national scene, whether that was this past weekend or the upcoming matchups that kind of catch your eye in shaping this college football landscape? Certainly, we're at the point in the season where there's been enough games played to start to work through some scenarios that actually have a little meat to them, but there's still so much more football to go. And most of the important matchups are in front of us that we can go a lot of different directions. And certainly we had a call-in show last night where people were looking at, Illinois got a loss, Wake Forest has a loss, TCU remains undefeated. Can those teams possibly, make a path to the college football playoff, which would be extraordinary. But in the meantime, all the workable, logical, and probable situations still continue to involve the teams that we're accustomed to, plus probably Tennessee.
Yeah, so I think nationally, I think it's interesting to see how a couple of these conferences will will factor into the playoff positioning. Tennessee obviously is the new guy right at the table that hasn't been there. Just really for me, one of the best games I've seen all year. Was their game a couple of weeks ago against Alabama, and so my question: can they hold up defensively against a team like Georgia? I think that's November 5th, right? A couple of weeks from now. They got a dangerous game this weekend against Kentucky, certainly, but and then can Georgia continue to hold serve? And what does that look like between you've got Georgia? I mean, you really got Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama, which obviously Alabama is probably going to need to run the table, including that SEC championship game win. But they've probably got a pretty cakewalk rest of the way with Auburn being kind of in shambles. So that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. The Big Ten. Ohio State's just so much better than everyone, even Michigan. For my, for my money. I think you had tweeted this out, but I thought it was interesting. I thought Iowa played fairly well against them, except for they had to play offense, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But still, what Ohio State scored, what was it, 55 to, I can't remember the final.
Yeah, 54-10.
54-10, yeah.
I think I tweeted out, this is going to be the best defensive effort I've ever seen out of a team that's eventually going to give up 55 points. It was like 40-10 at the time.
But I think I came into this season thinking this, and I still think Ohio State's the best team in the country. I had one of my I was on another podcast for one of the colleagues there at Last Word, and I asked for just an outlandish, maybe bold prediction, and one of mine was that Ohio State was going to win every single game this year by double digits. So I think I don't think Michigan's specifically at Ohio State. I don't think Michigan will have enough offense to play with Ohio State. So I think Ohio State, and I'm not necessarily saying a cakewalk. Anytime you go to Happy Valley, I think that's tough, right? But I think Ohio State's so much better than everyone else in the Big Ten this year that they'll coast into the playoffs. I think. And then Clemson's interesting, right? I think Clemson is a story that's, they don't have really. There's not really anyone else that I think that's in the ACC outside of maybe a Wake Forest that probably can compete with them in the ACC championship game. But they've got a little bit of a interesting conundrum at quarterback right now. So interesting to see how that kind of works through itself. But then just back to the Big 12, I think TCU is obviously very much solidified their spot in the Big 12 championship game. There'll have to be a lot of things that would have to happen in a negative way, but they do have a little bit of a tougher schedule down the stretch. They go to West Virginia this weekend. They go to Texas. They go to Baylor. So those are three games that'll be interesting and tough for them on the road, particularly Texas and Baylor. And then as we talk about, I don't know that they can necessarily make it undefeated through those games, but they seem to find ways to win. They were down 28-10 to Kansas State and came back. They've had a couple of comeback wins, and particularly over Oklahoma State the week previous. So they have seemed to have found a formula to win. But then you look at Oklahoma here, as you mentioned earlier. They've got 5 games here to win 2, right? To get bowl to bowl eligibility, and so you look at it. You've got obviously Iowa State here, which is one of your better chances at winning. And you've got a couple of home games against Baylor and Oklahoma State. Not that those games are unwinnable, but particularly on the defensive side of the ball, they're going to challenge Oklahoma's offense as a couple of the better defensive teams in the Big 12, and then you have those games around going to Texas Tech, who just absolutely obliterated West Virginia on Saturday, and then you go to West Virginia, late in the year. So I think it'll be tough. I think honestly, you have a couple of opportunities, but can they do what they need to do defensively to keep themselves in games and in contention? But I think you have that schedule there with they go straight. Obviously no more bye weeks, so they're straight the rest of the way with a couple of those home games in between the road games. It's alternating obviously for the rest of the 5 weeks, away home, and then away again at Texas Tech, who's, like I said, played really, really well at home this year. So, yeah, it'll be fun to watch. I think overall, it seems like TCU and Kansas State right there are still have an edge, but with Oklahoma State right there, I think Texas has an outside chance. They didn't do themselves any favors with that. With a loss to Oklahoma State on Saturday, when they had a big lead in the second half. But it'll be, as the races kind of start getting tighter as the season goes on, I think, with that obviously bowl positioning, but playoff positioning as well. With some of these teams, what can they do? Can Tennessee continue this magic ride? Does Alabama get left out this year as a team that has not played as well as they have been in the past? Strikingly, they've been outcoached a couple of games, which is a little bit kind of mind-boggling to hear a Nick Saban team being outcoached, but they could easily have had 3 losses at this point. And just have the one, but they'll get a matchup with either Tennessee or Georgia in the SEC championship game, and so looking at that positioning, it'll be I think it'll be interesting. I think you've probably got, Mark, and in my opinion, you've got 5 or 6 teams that will be there to challenge for 4 spots between when you look at Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Ohio State. You could even throw Michigan in there, if they ended up just having 1 loss, and then certainly Clemson, and or maybe a Wake Forest, if they were to go in and win that ACC championship game. So a lot of interesting stuff continuing to go on here.
Yeah, can you imagine? And none of us expect this to happen, but nobody mentions Illinois, nobody mentions Wake Forest, but can you imagine a Wake Forest team that would get left out of the ACC championship game because they lost the head-to-head to Clemson? But Clemson has two fairly, I don't want to overstate them. These two teams aren't as good as they've been in the past, especially Notre Dame, but they've got Notre Dame and they've got South Carolina out of conference. So they could lose those games or lose one of those games that would severely damage Clemson's playoff hopes, but it doesn't affect their ACC standing. So they basically have a 2-game lead in that division. They're not going to blow it because they've beaten all the prime teams, Wake, NC State, Florida State. They've knocked them all off. So they're in the clear. But Wake Forest could land at the end of this season at 11-1, and their lone loss, was a double overtime loss to Clemson. And so what do you do with that resume? That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Illinois got so much more football to play, and I'm not touting them as a true playoff contender, but there is a path there at 6-1. They've got to play all the candidates in the Big Ten West, which is a muddled mess outside of Illinois. And then they've got a date against Michigan, which would give them a ton of cred.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, marching on to a Big Ten championship game. Like if they would somehow navigate Michigan and Ohio State and finish 12-1, well, then they're the Big Ten champion at 12-1. And that seems completely inconceivable. But getting it back to the Big 12, I have watched a lot of this Texas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, TCU for over the last 2 to 3 weeks as they have played each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I still come out of that loss that Oklahoma State suffered 2 weeks ago at TCU, in which they had a 17-point lead. And then based on what they were able to do against Texas in coming back from 17 down, is I still, even though TCU is the undefeated team, I still lean Oklahoma State as being the best team in the conference.
Yeah.
And then it strikes me as amusing, again, piling on Texas as we do from time to time, that I'm watching that game. And I started watching that game when Oklahoma State was behind, fully believing that they would come back and win that game. And they did. And at one point in the game, late in the game, I saw where Sark's record in one-score games at Texas is now 3-8. And Mike Gundy, who I have never touted as a great coach. I've never been a big Mike Gundy guy, but at the same time, I've never been a critic or detractor. I've just never really considered him to be at the peak of college football. But he's 47-27 in one-score games at Oklahoma State, which you'd have to look at each individual matchups to really weigh if they were supposed to be in those games or not. But over time, and he's been there forever, would point to one-score matchups being typically in like talent matchups that he's winning 65+% of those games, while again, Sark is struggling in those games. And when I don't know what your feel on this, Jason, is, but when Texas is on, they look like the best team. Their talent shines through and they look like the best team. Like when they're rolling it up against Oklahoma State in the first half, when they're playing Alabama, when they got it going, they look like the best team, but then they screw it up.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the best ceiling of any of these teams are Texas. It's Texas, without a doubt. But as you mentioned, they'll go through phases in games where if they lose interest or whatever it is, they're not executing. I mean, for as good as they were, I'm trying to remember the final score in that game, but they had 31 points at halftime.
41-34.
Yeah. So and Oklahoma State held them to 3 points in the second half, but Quinn Ewers was not good at all in that game from beginning to end, and they still scored 31 first half points. So, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's interesting to me. I think Oklahoma State and Texas probably are the two best teams, just kind of talent-wise looking at just watching them on the field. But you have the element of not trusting Texas, and then you have the element of not trusting Spencer Sanders. So, you almost kind of default to TCU as a team that really this year hasn't beaten themselves. They've overachieved on where you would expect them to be. But yeah, no, I think I would agree with you, Mark. I think um, on the neutral field, I would probably take Oklahoma State over TCU 7 out of 10 times. And so, we'll see how that continues to go here in the rest of the Big 12 season. Big game, obviously, between Oklahoma State and Kansas State Saturday, which will help either of those teams get into that situation where they can make a claim to get back to that Big 12 championship game for Oklahoma State. So I think that'll be. Again, that's a line that's interesting. I think it started as Kansas State was favored by 1.5 or 2 points, and now Oklahoma State's favored by about that same amount. So, both part of the intrigue in that game is going to be, Spencer Sanders is still a little bit banged up. He's played, obviously, and then Kansas State with both of their starting quarterbacks getting hurt to a degree against TCU, where they're on where they're at. So maybe there's some intel that makes Vegas believe that. Obviously, I know that's trending based on the betting line, where the money's going, but still, maybe there's some uncertainty what Kansas State's going to have at the quarterback position.
Yeah, to your earlier point, I don't see TCU going undefeated. They, of course, could. If you match them up against every particular opponent, can they win all those games? Of course, they can beat anyone on their schedule. But when you add it all up, just the probability of it happening is they've got a long way to go. They're 7-0. They only have 6 left. That seems like they're more than halfway home. But of course, the backstretch is backloaded versus a lot of give me wins early in the season. They've really only won 2 to 3 games that were substantial. So, all right, folks, that wraps it up for another Oklahoma Sooners Live here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you all being here. Catch Jason after the game against Iowa State. That should be 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon Central Time, something in that range. Make it on back here for Sooners Live next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central. All right, Jason, enjoy the game and have a great weekend.
Will do. Thank you, sir.